Has it ever happened between us where you've noticed that the sadness has, for example, sadness has come up and you've shut it down?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, particularly sort of in that period, sort of about a year ago, between sort of October and sort of December.
Yeah. I'm really interested of what happens. Like, so firstly, if you feel that emotion, where do you feel that and what does that feel like?
It feels a little bit like you're trying to get a breath. And you know that if you... It's kind of weird because it's... I never really think of it as shutting it down. I think of it as just sending it somewhere else. Because it feels like I'm trying to get a breath, and if I take a breath a certain way, I'll sob.
Yeah.
And if I breathe a different way, I won't.
Yeah.
So it just feels more like... I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense.
It feels more like you're sort of...
It's almost like you've got a choice of pathway in
Yeah.
a sense. Yeah. And if you were by yourself, you might choose to go down the path of breathing into the emotion.
Yeah.
And if you're around others, you're more likely to choose the path of breathing away from it.
Yeah.
How conscious is that choice?
I think it's quite a conscious thing. I mean, it kind of feels like second nature, but it's definitely a conscious thing where I know I'm feeling a certain way or that something's going to happen. So it does feel like a conscious effort not to do that.
Yeah. What stops you from going down the path of breathing into the feeling?
Probably a certain amount of fear, a certain amount of embarrassment, a certain amount of, shame. But I think more than anything else, it's just it's a weird kind of twisted pragmatism.
Say more.
Well, I kind of think, I might really be fucked up next week and need them then.
So you think there's a quota?
Yeah.
Of how much you're allowed?
Yeah. I do.
Interesting.
I've always kind of felt that. It's like, because it's, I know, there are, I think we all have people in our lives who, we care for, and with the best will in the world we want to help or we want to be there for. But there are sometimes you just think, oh, fuck off. Just pull yourself together, or, and you feel bad for thinking that, but it's just like, or you think, oh, you're milking this now, or you're not doing anything to help yourself, and it's a very judgmental thing. And I try not to think that way about people, but maybe it's probably going back to my Jiminy Cricket, where I do think that myself. I do think, well, if I cry on this person's shoulder too many times, when I actually maybe I'll really need it somewhere down the line.
What's particularly interesting in what you're saying is that inner critic, Jiminy Critic voice is telling you that narrative as someone who basically never cries on anyone. Now, if you were saying pretty much half the time I see my friends, I'm crying on them, and I'm trying to keep the other half clear of that, I'd be like, I get it. But what I'm hearing you say is, I never cry on anyone, and I
very rarely cry on anyone.
Very rarely, yeah. But the inner critic, like the narrative that the story is that, and to be blunt, I take your point about the quota. Like we all know people who live in victim mode, let's say, and every time you see them, it's like just emotionally and physically draining, and it's like you walk away with less energy than you started because of how they are. Yeah. But you're not one of those people. Right. I mean, that's not.
I'm worried. I'm worried sometimes that I could be, or I'm worried sometimes that people will start to see me that way.
And yet, it's also true to say that the more emotionally honest and authentic someone is, generally speaking, the closer and more connected we feel to that person. But put it another way, intimacy, and I mean intimacy in the context of friendship and emotional closeness, not kind of sexual intimacy. Intimacy is a bit of a cliche, but intimacy is into me see. It's letting someone see the truth of how we feel in that moment. And when we do that, we normally feel closer, and that person also feels closer to us, because there's not the usual facades and walls and sort of barriers between. There's an honesty and a connection that comes from that. And my sense is that when you have that I breathe into it or I breathe away from it, that breathing away from it, in a sense, is possible because you put down a bit of a wall or a barrier, which keeps it in, but it also keeps people out.
Yeah, I mean, I just know that there's been times when, you know, I've wanted to talk to people about certain things, or, you know, and usually I feel I can, but there's been one or two times where, you know, I've started to talk to somebody about something and they've sort of like, well, they've kind of went, and you can tell that they don't feel comfortable.
Yeah, I understand that.
They kind of stiffen up and they're kind of like, you know.
And that is probably the moment where you might choose to breathe away from the path. But that also isn't true in every instance, right?
Yeah.
Because what I think I'm hearing you say is that, so in those moments, I think you're right. I think expressing ourselves in a very raw, vulnerable way with someone that's not going to hold it is actually quite traumatic, because we're really vulnerable and someone's not really holding it. But what I'm also hearing you say is there are instances where if you were to breathe into it and express it, not only would that person hold you and support you in that, like you did for that stranger on the underground, but also there's potential for there to be greater closeness in that friendship.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I think there's some people where recently, you know, I've sort of made a sort of tentative reach for them, or reach out to them. Reach for them, that just sounds weird.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, and they've been really uncomfortable, and in fact, one of them was like, "I'm not comfortable talking about this," and I was like, and I think that, you know, there is that moment where you think, will you go a bit Hannibal Lecter? Not in that you eat someone, that'd be wrong, but like, you know, it's that sort of quid pro quo thing. It's like, well, you know, I was there for you, fucker.
Sure.
you know,
I understand.
And, you know, again, I don't like to think like that, and I try not to, but there is that immediate reaction sometimes where you think, yeah, I'll remember that the next time you phone me at 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I don't, you know, I still answer the phone.
Yeah, because you're a kind person. But I think there's also, one does have to choose carefully. And I think it is hurtful / disappointing in relationship with someone where we have been there for them and then we reach out and they're not.
Yeah.
I think that's genuinely quite hurtful. And I'm wondering about the people that you can be. Because what I'm hearing is there are people that you know you can't be. There are other people where you would hope to be able to be, but actually they've been a bit disappointing. But I think there's a third category of people that you actually could be that way with, but you still choose not to.
Yeah.